Okay, so the frame building part. It pretty much took me a few hours to build the frame, but then there was also the painting of the frame and the outer part of the frame. So I would say it took me about an hour to actually build the frame, but then afterwards I flipped it over and I painted the inside back part green because I wanted to make sure that if there was any missing pieces of moss that you wouldn't see the wood showing through. And I also had to stain the outer part of the frame. So I would say definitely around 3 hours or so. I did leave the piece inside of my garage sitting for the whole week to make sure that it dried properly so that when we were ready to pick it up, it wouldn't fall apart. So a few years ago, I happened to land on this page that had amazing moss art. That was the first time that I ever saw it. I thought it was absolutely gorgeous. I am a nature lover. I love bringing nature and the colors and green inside the house to kind of give you that feeling as if you're outside. So I just fell in love with that piece and I showed it to my husband and he was like, oh man, this is gorgeous. So before we got our house, we were definitely thinking, all right, this is a piece that we're gonna invest in. But you know, when we got into our house, we were just like, man, we want a really big piece. And so when we checked it out and we saw the price for the really, really big one, I was like, you know what? I'm an artist. Why not try to make it myself? I've never built a moss art wall before, and man, I'm super happy with the way it came out. So I purchased most of my moss on Amazon. So I went ahead and bought it in bulk. So make sure you type in the word bulk. And this moss is preserved moss. So it once was alive, but they put a chemical on it and treated it so that it would keep its natural green color. So instead of drying out and turning an ugly brown, it stays green because it was preserved. So there's no maintenance for it. I don't have to water it or do anything like that because it's no longer alive, but it still looks gorgeous. Now, as far as the smell, there is a little bit of a smell to it, but as time goes on, the smell disappears because it's able to air out and, you know, now it looks gorgeous on the wall. So, no, I did not paint any of the moss. And this is a funny thing. My husband was like, babe, there's some brown spots in the moss. Why don't you just paint some of those brown spots so that it all looks really beautiful and green? And I was like, you know what? I want to not do that because I like the contrast of the different colors of green. And I feel like it looks more real when you have some parts that are just not so perfect. So no, it's not painted at all. Okay, so the maintenance for this piece is very, very minimal. It doesn't need much maintenance at all. I mean, if anything, maybe being dusted because, you know, dust can rest on it. So maybe you want to take a brush and brush some of the dust off of it if it does get dusty. And the only thing I can say is make sure to keep it out of direct sunlight so it will not cause the moss to fade. And I'm sure you're gonna get a little bit of shedding in the beginning when you first put it up because of course it's loose material, so it might fall off a little bit, but other than that, there's nothing really that you need to do to take care of your moss wall. All right, so size matters, right? Well, let's just say that my husband was like, go big or go home. I originally wanted to do a triptych. I wanted to do 3 pieces and, you know, connect them together to make one big piece. But he was like, no, you need to go huge because it's gonna be a huge statement on the wall. And I'm kind of afraid to admit this, but he was right. So where we decided to go with this piece was in the foyer, which is at the entrance of my home. And we have tall ceilings. They're 12-foot ceilings. So I'm gonna insert a picture so you can kind of get an idea of the dimensions. But we really wanted to fill up the wall and just not make it look you know, lost in the wall, like a little tiny thing on the wall. So we definitely had to go big. And so I'm happy with the fact that we went with a 6x10. I'm a tall person, and you will be able to see in the pictures that this piece is hovering over my head. So you can see and get a feel of how big this thing is. So the dimensions for this piece is 6 foot by 10 foot. We went ahead and got these really super strong anchors to put in the wall that say that they can hold up to 300 pounds. Before putting the moss on the wall, we believe it was under 100 pounds, but definitely it's over 100 pounds now that the moss is on the wall. And you know, it took 2 to 3 people to hold it at once because of how big it is. And so we wanted to make sure that this thing is not coming off this wall. And so we have these long brackets that are behind there that they kind of like slide in place and lock in. So we wanted to make sure that it's safe and that nobody could pull it off the wall. So make sure you get anchors that can support a lot of weight. And they also have these special thin brackets that kind of lock in place with each other so that nobody can really pull it off without having to lift it up first. So the sticks that are in my moss piece, you can find them at one of your local craft stores. In the dried flower section, they have different types of sticks. Or you can go outside. I mean, hey, what's wrong with just going outside and picking some sticks off the ground, you know? Hey, either one, it works. So this is the big question that everybody wants to know. How much money did I spend on making this piece? So I believe that I spent under $500 when I think of all the stuff that it included minus the tools, because I'm not going to count the tools. The tools were mine from before. But with the moss and the frame and the painting and the staining and everything that I did to it, it pretty much cost under $500. Now, when we were doing our research, because we wanted to get our own moss wall from somebody else, they had a piece that was less than half the size, and it was about $3,000. So I want to say that based on the size of this piece is definitely worth more than $7,000. I do not recommend hanging this piece outside if you're going to go with preserved moss. Preserved moss is chemically treated to keep the green, but with all the elements outside, wind, rain, and it not being allowed to be in direct sunlight, I would not recommend going with preserved moss. If you want to do a piece outside that looks like moss, go with the plastic or go with fake moss balls. And then that way you'll be able to have it outside on your patio or outdoors, wherever you want it to be.